President talks to labor leaders almost on a daily basis, pushing his health care agenda. The fact is that we as members of Congress, a co-equal branch of government, also have a responsibility in this decision-making process. Now, I respect the President's role as Commander-in-Chief. I respect the President of the United States making a decision. But I also cherish the role of the United States Senate and House of Representatives in being informed as to the views of our military commanders in whom we place the responsibilities and the lives of our young men and women who are in harm's way. So all we're seeking with this amendment is a date certain, not immediately. The date for this requirement of testimony by General McChrystal, General Petraeus, General Stavridis, and perhaps others, if necessary, by November 15th. That's a month and a half from now. Shouldn't we hear a month and a half from now, within a month and a half, as to what we are considering? I would hope that the decision would be made clear. Admiral Mullen, in testimony, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, said, quote, "The President has given us a clear mission: disrupt, dismantle, and defeat al-Qaeda, et cetera, et cetera." But the President in March said that the situation was increasing, quote, the President of the United States said, quote, "increasingly perilous, and that the future of this troubled nation is inextricably linked to the future of its neighbor, Pakistan." He also called it a war of necessity and declared America must no longer deny resources to Afghanistan. And obviously, I agree with him, and have time after time made my commitment of willingness and desire to work with him. But it's very difficult for members of the Armed Services Committee and members of the Senate to work with him if we are not informed by the uniformed commanders in the field. And Admiral Mullen, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, emphasized in testimony before the Senate Armed Services Committee, time is not on our side. There are already somewhere between 62 and 68,000 American troops in the field in danger, and tragically, casualties have gone up. We have a responsibility also, I say. We have a responsibility to hear from our commanders in the field. And let me point out, General McChrystal was on 60 Minutes talking about what we needed to do in Afghanistan. General McChrystal gave a speech in London just yesterday talking about what we needed to do. So it's okay with the administration for General McChrystal to go on 60 Minutes. It's okay for him to give a speech at the Institute for Strategic Studies in London, but the administration does not want General McChrystal and General Petraeus before the Senate Armed Services Committee. How does that work? So I hope that my colleagues would vote for my amendment, which calls for the same basically testimony by the Commander of the United States Central Command, Commander of the United States European Command, and Supreme Allied Commander of Europe, the Commander of the United States Forces Afghanistan, and of course we'd like to hear from the United States Ambassador to Afghanistan, Ambassador Eikenberry. So this is pretty clear. This is a very clear decision we have to make. We are asking that within a month and a half from now, that these individuals appear before the respective committees and testify as to what they believe the best strategy to be employed in order to achieve victory. Why shouldn't the United States Senate and the Congress and the people of the United States hear directly in testimony before the Congress what they believe is the best way to ensure victory in Afghanistan? So I understand the debate that's going on within the White House and the deliberations that the President is undertaking as he considers the most heavy responsibility that any president has, and that is to send our young men and women into harm's way or not. So I have some sympathy. But I would point out there are already close to 68,000 young Americans, and casualties are going up. According to Admiral Mullen, according to every expert, the situation is deteriorating in Afghanistan. So this is not, should not, and must not be a leisurely exercise. Decisions have to be made, and we, I speak for myself, and I'm sure of all of my colleagues, we want to be part of that decision making. We don't want to make that decision because that's the responsibility of the President of the United States. But it is also the responsibility of the Congress of the United States to appropriate the money for it. And when a president lost the confidence of the American people in the Congress of the United States in a war long ago and far away, the Congress of the United States did cut off the funding for further assistance in Vietnam. So I hope that the Senate will act in a positive fashion and act on what I think is a reasonable request, that within a month and a half that we could have the testimony before the Senate Armed Services Committee. And I would remind my colleagues that the chairman of the House Armed Services Committee, the distinguished Congressman Ike Shelton, and the ranking member of the House Armed Services Committee also want this testimony to take place. The majority leader of the House of Representatives, Congressman Hoyer, has also called for testimony before the Congress of the United States. And why the administration should be reluctant to send these people before us so that we can, in any way we can find possible, support the President of the United States as he makes these tough decisions, which we can't do unless we are informed of the opinion of those we are sending to command and lead in battle, then it's difficult for us to show our support for the President in the form of appropriations bills and authorizations as to what is needed without hearing from the commanders in the field. Now, there will be discussion about General Petraeus's testimony before the Congress of the United States. I would remind my colleagues that the decision was made by the President on the surge very rapidly, that the decision was made and General Petraeus was called before what appeared before the Senate Armed Services Committee to give the reasons for that. I think it's very important that the man that the President of the United States fired the previous commander, let's be clear, fired the previous commander because he had confidence in General McChrystal, that we should also be allowed the ability to hear his vision and his strategy that would bring about a successful conclusion of a long, tragic, hard involvement in Afghanistan. So, Mr. President, I hope that we can have the same luxury that the Institute for Strategic Studies in London just received, with General McChrystal giving a speech there and answering questions, that we would have the same courtesy that 60 Minutes, the producers and commentators on 60 Minutes just received. I would hope that the United States Senate would receive that same ability to directly question General McChrystal, General Petraeus, and others. Mr. President, Madam President, I yield the floor.
Senator from Michigan.
Madam President, I don't know if the unanimous